Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the June 19, 2019 Pittsburgh Board of Public Education and Pittsburgh Mount Oliver Intermediate Union Legislative Meeting. Before we begin this evening, I'd like to ask everyone to please turn off all cell phones or put them on vibrate. Would everyone please rise so we can salute the flag? I pledge allegiance We'll begin this evening with Pittsburgh Mount Oliver Intermediate Unit. Mr. Weiss, may we please have a roll call?
Mr. Carter.
Here.
Ms. Edwards.
Here.
Ms. Falls.
Present.
Dr. Holly.
Here.
Mrs. Kalida. Mrs. Kennedy.
Present.
Mr. Dean.
Yes.
Here. Ms. Wilson.
Here.
Ms. Wren.
Here.
Okay, at this point, we have 8 members present.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Will board members please turn to the minutes from last month? Are there any corrections, additions, or deletions? Okay, if there are no corrections or additions, I'd like to have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of May 22nd, 2019 legislative meeting for the Pittsburgh Mount Oliver Intermediate Unit. Ms. Wilson first.
Second.
Thank you. Regina Hawley, second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. The minutes have stand approved. The committee report on education that includes agenda items 20.01 and to 22.01 is before you. Are there any questions, comments that were not answered at agenda review? If there are no further questions or comments, do we have a motion and a second for a roll call vote?
So moved.
Ms. Falls, first.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Holly. Second, Dr. Holly. Mr. Weiss, may we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Carter. Mr. Carter.
Yes. Is this on the education report?
For Pittsburgh Mount Oliver Intermediate Unit.
Ms. Edwards.
Yes.
Ms. Falls.
Yes.
Dr. Holly.
Yes.
Mrs. Kennedy.
Yes.
Mr. Dean.
Yes.
Ms. Wilson.
Yes.
Mrs. Wren.
Yes.
Report's approved 8-0.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. The committee report on business finance that includes agenda 23.01 through 26.02 is before you. Are there any questions or comments that were not answered at agenda review? If there are no comments or questions, do we have a motion and a second for a roll call vote?
So moved. Second.
Okay, first motion, Ms. Wilson. Second motion, Ms. Falls. Thank you. Mr. Weiss, may we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Carter.
Yes.
Ms. Edwards.
Yes.
Ms. Falls.
Yes.
Dr. Holly.
Yes.
Mrs. Kalida. Mrs. Kennedy.
Yes.
Mr. Dean. Yes. Ms. Wilson.
Yes.
Mrs. Wren.
Yes.
The item is approved unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Item 27.01 and 27.02 is the Pittsburgh Mount Oliver Personnel Report. Are there any questions or comments on the report? If there are no questions or comments, do we have a motion and a second for a roll call vote?
So moved. Second.
Thank you, Ms. Falls, for the first. Thank you, Dr. Holly, for the second. Mr. Weiss, may we please have a roll call vote?
Mr. Carter. Ms. Edwards,
Yes.
Ms. Falls,
Yes.
Dr. Holly,
Yes.
Mrs. Kennedy,
Yes.
Mr. Udine,
Yes.
Ms. Wilson,
Yes.
Mrs. Wren.
Yes.
Report's approved unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Item 28.01 is the Pittsburgh Mount Oliver Intermediate Unit Financial and Travel Report for May 2019. Are there any questions or comments on the report? If there are no questions or comments, I'd like to have a motion and a second to adjourn. Motion by Dr. Holly, second by Ms. Falls. Thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, same side. This meeting is adjourned. I would now like to call the June 19, 2019 meeting for Pittsburgh Public Schools to order. Mr. Weiss, can we please have a roll call?
Ms. Carter,
Here.
Ms. Edwards,
Here.
Ms. Falls,
Present.
Dr. Holly,
Here.
Mrs. Kalida, Mrs. Kennedy,
Present.
Mr. Udine,
Here.
Ms. Wilson,
Here.
Mrs. Wren.
Here.
8 members present.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. At this time, I'd like to ask Ms. Sylvia Wilson to share our core beliefs and commitments.
Thank you. Our core beliefs and commitments are as follows. We will educate all children to their highest level of academic achievement. We will provide a safe and orderly environment for all students and employees. We will provide efficient and effective support for all students, families, teachers, and administrators. We will distribute resources in an efficient and equitable manner to address the needs of all students to the maximum extent feasible. We will improve public confidence and encourage strong parent-community engagement in the district. Thank you, Mrs. Wren.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Will board members please turn to the minutes? Tonight we will be approving the minutes for May 22nd, 2019 legislative session. Are there any corrections, additions, or deletions? I'd like to have a motion and a second to approve the minutes for May 22nd, 2019 legislative session. First, Mr. Udine, second, Dr. Holly. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The minutes stand approved. At this time, I'd like to read the executive session statement. In addition to the executive session announced at the legislative meeting May 22nd, 2019, the board met in executive sessions on June 12, 2019, June 18, 2019, and immediately before this legislative meeting to discuss various personnel matters that may include, but are not limited to, administrative vacancies and positions open and closed. The board does not vote at executive session. The committee report on education and student performance is before you, submitted by Ms. Sylvia Wilson, chairperson, and her committee. The report includes agenda items 5.01 through 8.25. If you would please turn to the agenda item 8.25, I'd like to give you the student suspension, transfer, and expulsion numbers for this month. 19 students were suspended 4 to 10 days. And 10 students were expelled out of school for 11 days or more. There were no items pulled for further discussion and agenda review. Are there any questions or comments on the committee report on education at this time that were not answered in agenda review? Okay, if there are no comments or questions, yes, Ms. Holly, Dr. Holly.
Yes, is there some more knowledge that we should have about 8.24? Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, if there are no more questions, I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Jones for any additions.
Thank you, Ms. Wren. I have a prepared a statement regarding 8.24 that I want to read. I remain committed to being the superintendent who listens to the voices of all stakeholders. I have heard the concerns of the board members and the community related to the timing of our announcement of the reconfiguration of Pittsburgh Malines. I also heard from board members familiar with the success of the transition of Wilkinsburg students to Westinghouse, the desire for a similar timeline to plan the transition of middle school students in Malines feeder to Pittsburgh Arsenal. While I know the transition to Pittsburgh Arsenal will provide middle schoolers in the Malines feeder pattern an enriched educational option, I'm committed to working with families and the community to ensure that no stone is left unturned in planning a successful transition for students. As a result, I am revising item 8.24's timeline for the reconfiguration of Pittsburgh Malines to occur at the start of the 2020-21 school year. This means we also will push back the transition of the school's middle school feeder pattern to Pittsburgh Arsenal to allow for a full year of transition planning, as well as to strengthen the school's early college model. We will also provide the board quarterly updates during education committee meetings. Together with the board and community, we can and will ensure students arrive to Pittsburgh Malines in the 9th grade prepared to meet the rigor of an early college program. For those students and families who have expressed a desire to transition to Pittsburgh Arsenal, we ask that you stick with us as we plan this year. Your input and your voices also have been heard, and we ask that you continue to be present. It is critical that we are listening to all voices and develop a plan that best serves the interests of all of our students and families. We are dedicated to developing our plans in concert with the community for the betterment of our students. We will provide regular updates to the board, again publicly, to ensure all board members and the general public is informed of our progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hamlet. Are there any questions? Ms. Walls?
We also have a few more changes.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Item 6.23 for Macedonia Face, 6.26 Macedonia Face will be pulled, and item 6.27 will be pulled, and item 8.23 will be pulled. Those will all be a part of the planning process moving forward.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Ms. Falls?
Thank you, Ms. Wren. Dr. Hamlet. While my vote is yes, there are some things that I would like to share with you. However, I am publicly saying that I approve the year 2019 to 2020 as a working year regarding the movement of the middle school students of UPrep to Pittsburgh Arsenal. I am sure that techniques and strategies will be put into place to be utilized by all levels of people involved in this movement. I am requesting that during this process, I am requesting that during this process, Mr. Udine, Dr. Holly, and Ms. Wilson work along with the district and keep the rest of the board updated regularly, which you have said. In addition, I'm also stating that time appropriate, the board is able to reevaluate this matter and make our decision at that time. So I'm saying I'm willing to work with you, but I would also like the option at an appropriate time as we feel necessary to be able to reevaluate.
We'll work on that, Ms. Falls. Absolutely.
Thank you, Dr. Hamlet. Thank you, Ms. Wren.
Thank you, Ms. Falls. Mr. Carter and then Mr. Udine.
So I guess I have two questions. At some point, Mr. Weiss, can you read back the actual resolution that we're voting on related to this, so we know exactly what it is? Because I know that it has changed, but I don't know if it has changed in the board tab itself.
Dr. Hamlin has revised item 8.24. I mean, I'll read it. The only change is the date. But resolved that the Board of School Directors of the School District of Pittsburgh authorizes proper officers to approve the reconfiguration of the University Preparatory School of Margaret Malines 612 to the University Preparatory School of Margaret Malines High School beginning with the 2020-21 school year, and the reassignment of students to access enhanced educational programming. For the start of the 2020-21 school year, students in grades 6 to 8 at Pittsburgh Malines will be assigned to Pittsburgh Arsenal 6-8, already a Malines feeder school. The change Dr. Hamlin has presented changes the start date to 2020-21 from 2019-20. As I understand it, the rest of the tab remains the same.
Point of order.
And I got before you. Can I ask another question before you ask your point?
Proceed, Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Rice, for reviewing that. So, Ms. Falls, is your suggestion an amendment to the board tab to include these things? Or is it a suggestion?
It's a suggestion.
Just a minute, Mr. Carter. We're trying to figure that out.
If you are suggesting that, I mean, the item as it is before you establishes this to start in 2020-21, and Dr. Hamlin has, in his statement, said that the 2019-2020 school year will be a planning year. If you are suggesting that this change should be dependent on certain things, then that's a little bit different than the board tab. The board tab approves it and gives the net this year for planning. So
Gotcha.
that's the difference. If you're suggesting that this not become effective until you have some indication of the planning, then that's different.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get to. And I know Ms. Falls had made a specific suggestion about including Mr. Dean, Ms. Wilson, and Dr. Hawley in the process. And so I did not know if she was amending what had been presented, but I guess I have an amendment to propose once we get to that point. But I know that Mr. Dean had a point of order.
Thank you. My point of order has to do with how we amend the amendment, because what I want us to consider is rejecting the idea of closing the school and sending it to Arsenal altogether, and that the planning that takes place this coming year is a year of planning for success, not planning how to get to Arsenal. So what I'm interested in is voting down both the bill as it is presented and voting down the amendment if it's for just planning for the move to Arsenal. And I'm interested in substituting a language that has us planning for the success of the Margaret Malines Prep School. How do we do that?
Well, the item before the board is item 8.24, which has been revised to have a different start date. That is the item that's before the board right now. So there's been no, what I would call amendment. Dr. Hamlin has presented a revised board tab on behalf of the administration. So it's the board's decision what it wishes to do with this tab and whether it wishes to substitute anything else. But there is no amendment to this on the floor right now.
And I would move to amend at the appropriate time, Madam President.
I'm sorry, the speaker, could you repeat that? I didn't catch that because I was getting noise from here.
At the appropriate time, I would like to amend the bill that is currently being considered to change the date of planning for a closure of Malayans and planning to go to Arsenal with planning for the success of the school at Malayans.
Are you proposing an amendment to this to reword this? Okay. Could you state it?
I propose that we amend the current language to clarify that there will be a year of planning for the 1920 school year, but that planning year will be planning for the success of the school at Malayans Preparatory School, not planning for a closure of that school and moving to Arsenal.
Okay, so the amendment is on the floor for discussion.
Ms. Falls?
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Wren. My comments give us that opportunity to make that decision. And I understand what you're saying, Mr. Udine. Instead of trying to work on plans to move the children for this year, you want plans for success to happen at UPrep.
Just to clarify, the planning has to begin immediately. We don't have a lot of time. So if we're going to use the year that's before us, we have to begin now. And so we have to be clear about what we are planning to do. We're either planning to close Malayans and move it to Arsenal, or we're planning for the success at Malayans. That's an important consideration, and we have to know whether we're headed north or south as soon as we start our planning work.
Ms. Falls?
Thank you, Ms. Wren. And ultimately, that's what my last statement was, that the board will review in a timely fashion if they feel this should occur or not. But I understand what you're saying. You're saying either plan here for UPrep or plan for Arsenal. Yes. Okay, and again, I'm saying that we should, in a timely fashion, I mean, to put into place some of the strategies and techniques that I'm sure will be done, to leave that decision ultimately, again, to the board. That would be administration's decision. Like, I don't know, I would expect sometime in the spring or earlier. I mean, we would see how things are going, and you know,
I would say we take a few notes from the Wilkinsburg Westinghouse transition, look at that plan and see exactly how those meetings took place, because I know they took extensive meetings and had several subcommittees, and we'll do something similar or the same that needs to be done with this particular transition.
and Dr. Hamlet, do you have a task force or a committee organized to do this?
I've already been contacted by community leaders about a task force as well, so we will be working with the community on this task force so that all of us can work together for this transition.
Thank you, Dr. Hamlet. Thank you, Ms. Wren.
And Mrs. Perry, my problem with voting for what Dr. Hamlet was proposing tonight is we still don't have details, and we're proposing a blank check, which is why I like Fowler's amendment to the resolution to it. And I think that when we're doing planning for success, that's success to look any number of ways. For example, Dr. Marge McMacken actually had a really good suggestion. Move them for 1 year and redesign the school and bring them back for success. That's still on the table as far as I'm concerned. Everything is on the table, and in the end of the day, we might still do what Dr. Hamlet wants to do, but I think it's too soon to say now that we know we want to do that. We have to really look and figure out what is the best course and not have it rushed. To me, the only difference between how this was when the agenda item was posted and now was the change of date. To me, we're still signing a blank check. And without the details and saying, well, we'll come back and give you updates, or we'll be doing checkpoints, that doesn't cut it with me. We need to have the details when we vote, which is why I support Mr. Udin's amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Mr. Carter?
I was just saying that I think that if there is a task force, that the task force should be recommended by the superintendent and approved by the board.
Ms. Wilson?
Can I comment?
Oh, well, let.
Ms. Kalida and then Ms. Wilson.
All right. Sorry, Ms. Wilson. I'm not watching, so I apologize for jumping ahead. My thoughts on this are basically around that we cannot vote on anything without community input. And so therefore, I can't vote yes for anything that hasn't incorporated some significant community input from the people that are affected by this decision. So I, feel strongly that we need to have the ability to assess everything. And if all of the data and, everything we gather leads to one decision, then we should do that. But I'm not down basically for voting for something that is just a blank check of that we're going to neglect you prep for a year and, go from there on reorganization. I feel strongly that where our resources need to go are surely where the kids are, where they need to be, and what we can do for them right now. And that is 100%, where I'm at, as far as, I don't know why we're voting on closing a school when we can resource them to the point that, we feel that other schools are resourced. So I just want to put in my 2 cents there.
Ms. Wilson?
Okay, a lot of things. The Hill District was my home, not where I lived, but where I lived with working with kids for 28, 30 years. Students who are in the middle school program at the Lines right now are not all Hill District students. As a matter of fact, I think the statistics are that 86% of the students who live in the Hill District go elsewhere and are not even in any of the 3 Hill District schools at this moment. I don't feel that we're saying we want to, if we do nothing right now, I'm not saying that we are throwing our students away, as it was just implied. We are not going to throw them away, but I do know that this plan that we just heard about recently actually had been discussed starting in October and furthermore in January. It's just unfortunate, and I had said this before, it's unfortunate that this became more public in May, when in fact there was discussion and planning that happened a lot sooner, because there was a lot of concern about the students, because it's a small group of students at University Prep at Malines. It's about 60 students. The number goes between 60, 70, 75, but still it's not a large group of students. And I did liken it to Wilkinsburg. Wilkinsburg had grades 7 through 12. They had 200 kids. And that was not enough students to provide an adequate education for them across those grade levels. And right now, we were looking at a small number of students, and we were looking at another nearby school that actually feeds into that school, and looking at some of the programs that already exist. I actually thought it was a good idea. There's a lot of diversity at Arsenal. Diversity does not always mean black and white. There's a lot of nationalities at Arsenal, and I find that students that are exposed to such diversity are become a lot richer personally, and as they move forward in life, that they really grow a lot. And I've seen that happen through my own children and grandchildren when they have been exposed to a lot more than just who looks in the mirror and looks like them. The planning that went into this was not haphazard. As I said, there was a lot of discussion, and there was a lot of, it's just unfortunate it took a long time. It didn't come out to the community. Now, I attended a community meeting recently, and I didn't hear people say too much that they didn't want it to happen. It seemed like the common consensus was that they just felt there should have been more time in the planning, which is, I thought, what this change that Dr. Hamlet was proposing was addressing that, because many of the parents, well, to be quite honest, there weren't a lot of parents there, but of those who were there, it basically wasn't that they were anti the idea, because I think that the idea to beef up university prep and really make it an early college model that some of us on this board have been pushing for more than 5 years, if we could really do that and beef that up, that is going to be something that once those students finish the middle school, will all want to come there and not decide to go to magnet schools all over the city of Pittsburgh. They will want to go there and partake in that enriched early college program, and in fact, would probably get students from other areas in the city of Pittsburgh to attend for the very same reasons. So I think that I feel like we have people in the community that weren't anti, it just was the timing. And I don't think that anybody is opposed to offering students as much enriched education and opportunity and experiences that they possibly can. And I really think that that is our main goal and objective, to provide as much possibilities for them as we move forward. And that's why I felt that changing this to, I was ready to vote for it now, to be quite honest, because I was very positive with Principal Camper and Dr. Hill on their plans that they had done beforehand were going to work. But due to the timing issue, then I feel that delaying it for a year and have more people involved in that planning process so that there's a better understanding and it doesn't feel rushed, I think that would be appropriate. And there were people at that meeting that talked about what we did with the planning with Wilkinsburg and Westinghouse. And I would think that that would be commensurate to what we're planning as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Mr. Udine?
Thank you. I apologize to the public who is trying to keep up with the twists and turns of this legislation. I'm having a difficult enough time with it myself. We had a community meeting this past Saturday at Ebenezer Baptist Church, and the overwhelming sentiment in that meeting is that we do not suffer the closing of another school in the Hill District. We have been through the closure of Shendley, of Fifth Avenue, of Robert L. Vann, of Madison. We've been through the closure of enough schools in the Hill District, and the overriding sentiment was do not close the middle school at Mallions. Now, I should also note that at that meeting, we announced the intention to begin an emergency task force on Hill District education. And several people signed up for that task force at that time and look forward to being called to the first meeting. As a matter of fact, the proposal was to roll up our sleeves and to meet every Saturday morning between now and the opening of school to put together a plan for success, not a plan to close the school. That is an important distinction to be made. It is not just a matter of timing. It is a question of what is our commitment to educating the children of the Hill District, educating the children of Malines U-Prep School in a manner that we promised that we would. So what I'm arguing for, and I appreciate the superintendent listening and adjusting and amending the original proposal to just close the school and send the kids to Lawrenceville to Arsenal, and giving us a year's planning. That's important, but it is also important what we are planning for. If you're planning on driving to New York, New York has to be your clear destination. Otherwise, you're going to wind up in Kentucky. So what's important is that we make a clear intention of this board that we are planning for success. We're planning for the success of Malines U-Prep, and the details can be worked out by that task force. I'm sure it will be possible for whoever Dr. Hamlet plans to put on his committee and the people who have already come forward saying they want to join the committee. We can combine all of those efforts, but we have to be clear that we're not planning for how to get to Lawrenceville. We're planning for the success of Malines U-Prep.
Are there any other questions or comments?
I'm not trying to be snotty or nasty, but these are things that came in my mind. It would have been really wonderful for those people who supported the closing of Schenley from the community, had wrapped their arms around Malines and did some of this planning and wonderful joining their hands, kumbaya, and we wouldn't be in this situation right now. And there are too many people who did not. They supported that close. We closed a wonderful school where people came from all over the city. Now, I know it's in the past, but nobody embraced what was going on at University Prep, which never did fulfill its mission. It never fulfilled its mission, not for the lack of some people who constantly talked about it. But, you know, let's look at it as it is. It isn't a matter, you know, our schools have decreased. I want to see a good school back at Malines, and I'm not saying that I was speaking against that. I actually want to see it strengthened. That's why I think the early college program there will be a wonderful draw, again, for anybody from coming anywhere around the city. Just wanted to make that clear. We getting ready to fight back and forth?
Yeah.
Dr. Hawley?
Thank you. I think that all of the board members have some really passionate and compassionate words for supporting the school. And this has been one of the hardest decisions I think that this board has had to make in many, many years. I understand the need for us to make some concessions in terms of making sure parents and community members are involved in whatever we do in terms of supporting the children at the school. I agree wholeheartedly with making the year, having a year to make that decision. I understand that if your goal is to get to the other side, which is to get to, is to move the students, I can see Mr. Udin's apprehension. However, I know that there are some things that need to be done immediately that the school district must do in conjunction with the parents to start off the school year so that the students are getting what they need. And there are some things that the school district has to do on their own, like starting to almost immediately to making sure that the school is ready and able to take students in the middle of August. I'm going to agree with some of the things that Mrs. Falls has said in that the amendment to this board tab from the superintendent gives us all an opportunity to sit back, do some great things at UPrep, and then make a decision that I can say maybe early spring that it's not necessary to move the children. We have been able to actually turn this school into the school that the children should be going. However, if we find that even with having only 60 to 70 students in the entire middle school is not working, then there is a viable alternative, and that alternative is working with the very diverse community at Arsenal. Not only working with the diverse community at Arsenal, but also working with a team that is stable, very aggressive in doing their academics, and certainly a community hub for the students that are in Arsenal. We have a really good opportunity here to have the best of both worlds for all of the students involved here, because it forces it puts the district on notice that there are certain things that the community is going to be asking them to do in order to support the youngsters. And not just the youngsters, but their families, because that is a community school. There is a community school that's also at Arsenal. They already have the capacity to do that work, which in turn they can actually partner with UPrep to make sure that they're all getting the same support services. I'd also would recommend very strongly to the district that we utilize the expertise of some of the activities and programming that is now at Arsenal, and have that same programming and activities working at UPrep. That's one of the things that I was at the meeting on Saturday as well, and that was one of a common theme that went throughout the room, that this, if they have it at Arsenal, why can't we have it at UPrep? So I am saying that there is a need for those for the principal and the teachers in that school to partner with the school in order to help them with their instructional progress there. Again, this is a very, very difficult decision, but I'm coming back with the same feeling that Mrs. Wilson has, in that the parents are asking, well, wasn't many parents there, but the community members that really believe in the Hill District are asking us to minimally wait for another year before making any decisions. But I will agree with Mr. Udine that it is imperative that the task force be up and running. It doesn't necessarily have to have me in it, but I'm going to do it anyway because I want to make sure that we are serving the children not only in that community, but from the communities that also feed into the school. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Holly. Mr. Udine.
Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Holly.
Ms. Edwards after Mr. Udine.
I am confident that with and just on the word of the superintendent, that if we are all working for the success of the children, we can make this happen and make it successful, certainly by spring, as Ms. Falls suggests. If we roll up our sleeves and get to work right away. Given the fact that the current principal is on injured sick leave, we have to figure out right away how we're going to even get to the opening of school this year. And the task force that we had talked about forming, along with the personnel from the district, if we are all working together and the superintendent is committed to working with us and not competing against us, we can make this work. And as long as we are not trying to compete against the superintendent, but working with the superintendent and administration, we can make this work. But I don't want it to be automatically assumed that we are working to get to Arsenal. We're trying to work to get to success for our kids. And if that's our commitment, then I think we should make sure that that commitment is registered in the minutes, and we can bring this discussion to a close, and I don't have to fight with Ms. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Udine. Ms. Edwards?
To say is, being on the outside looking in, I'm sorry I'm not there, but as I have heard everybody's opinions and everything has been said, my one question at this point would be to Dr. Hamlet. Dr. Hamlet, as UPrep Alliance is a community school, and it's one of the initiatives that we have undertaken that is going well. Would you be willing to work along with Mr. Udine, not with a sight of moving the kids, but improving the education, because it's the education of those children that was failing that leads to the move to Arsenal? Would you be willing to work along with Mr. Udine, whatever members of the board, and I would be willing to participate also, to make sure that an alliance would have the resources mentally, physically, academically, financially that they need to keep those students where they are and do what's best for them, their families, the community, and the school. Can I have an answer?
So, Ms. Edwards, And to answer your question, I would say that's my job. I'm charged to make sure and ensure that all kids are performing, and we're moving student achievement for all kids, but also paying particular attention to our most neediest population, our most vulnerable population. And we know Alliance is one of those schools. So I would also say publicly that moving the 6th through 8th graders to Arsenal is not a competing interest. We will support and fully support and help those schools thrive and become better places for all of our students. So it's not a competing interest. I'm not taking something away from Alliance to give it to Arsenal or vice versa. They will get supports that they need to be successful. We will fully realize what was promised to UPrep many years ago. So.
And what about the 2019-20 school year? What do we have in place while those students stay there, whether they go to Arsenal, stay at the Lions? It's a ball right now, and it's bouncing back and forth, and we are all over the place. What are we prepared to do for 2019-20?
No, to your point, we've already begun to make alternative plans. As I told my team, what are we going to do if this vote doesn't go through? What are we going to do with Milan? So we have plans for that. We can provide those plans to the board via board update on Friday. So we've been working on plans. You also have heard Ms. Erica Jones talk about some board tabs that we have for Pittsburgh Alliance as well. We have AVID. That's Achieving Via Individual Determination. That's a college readiness program that we're putting in there. We also have additional supports and other things that we're putting in place and putting placeholders in place to support Malines moving forward. And that's just the beginning.
Okay. We do need a plan, but we need a plan for everybody to work together for the good of the students. I'm willing to do that. Thank you.
Dr. Holly.
But I just want to say...
Mr. Carter after Dr. Holly, please.
I hear a lot about the early college, and I'm certainly a big supporter of that because I can see that it works really well at many of our schools across the city. However, I also know that there are some structural things that need to be done in order to get students to the point of wanting to or being very successful at an early college model. So I'm hoping that the task force will be able to identify those underlying structures that need to be in place in order to support the students. Thinking outside the box is one thing. Now it's time to actually build another box. So I'm looking at doing a little bit more than just the status quo that would be a part of another school, but we know that here the challenges may be a little different, and those challenges need to be met by making sure that those structures are in place to support the youngsters and families within the community.
Dr. Hamlet.
Dr. Holly, to your point, one of the board tabs is for NLA, Neighborhood Learning Alliance, and they do the Learn and Earn, and they have those college success coaches that support those students in those classes. We're bringing that college support, success support to Pittsburgh Alliance to make sure they work with the college, early college program to make sure those kids are successful.
Thank you, Dr. Hamlet. Mr. Carter?
I move to call the question.
Second.
Point out to the board, before you is the amendment offered by Mr. Udine, which basically reads there will be a year of planning for 1920 for success at University Preparatory in Milan, not planning for the closure and movement to Arsenal. That is the amendment that is before you. And it's time now to have a vote on that amendment. Mr. Carter?
On the amendment, I vote yes.
Ms. Edwards?
On the amendment, I vote yes.
Is that yes?
Yes. Yes.
I'm sorry, I can't hear her. Okay. Ms. Falls?
I need clarification. I really do. You keep referring to closing the school. The school in itself would not close. It would be the high school. And probably, you know, a lot more going into that high school. So it's not closing, it's moving, it would be, I'm just saying, maybe not, moving the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. Is that correct?
It's closing the middle school.
Yes,
Yes.
we're reconfiguring the
That's what
school,
we're
yes.
Okay, but I mean, I don't
Closing
want,
the middle.
So
right,
I
but
would
I
say,
don't
right,
want the public to think that the whole school, I mean, when you say that,
We're talking about closing the middle school.
that's fine.
so I would say this, understand something, there's no separate middle school. Right now, it's a 6 through 12 school. It's one school. It's not two schools.
Well, then it would have to be reconfigured
Yes,
to a
that's we're doing
9 to 12,
reconfiguration.
But, Ms. Falls, how do you vote on this? Dr. Hawley?
You might have to come back to me too, because I'm trying to understand are we voting on the amendment from Mr. Udine?
Yes, that's what we're voting
Are we
on.
voting
Just
on
the
the
amendment.
amendment to 8.24?
No, there's no amendment to 8 point, whatever it is. This is Mr. Udine's amendment. The board tab was revised by Dr. Hamlet. The board tab itself now reads that the movement of the students will begin in 2021. What is before the board now is Mr. Udine's amendment.
It says what? It says what? Plain English, says what? What does it say?
It says that the planning for this year will be for success at the school. That's what it says.
So we're voting on just having success for the school?
The point of Mr. Udine's amendment is that you're planning to have the school there and not planning to move the kids. That's the thrust of what he's saying, but he can say it better than I can.
Say it again. I'm missing it.
Our amendment was to direct the planning to the success of the school, 6 to 12, and not plan to move the 6th, 7th, and 8th graders as the basis of that plan to Arsenal. So, is that clear? Yes. That's my amendment.
It's clear to me now too, yes.
Mr. Kalida? Mrs. Kalida?
Yeah, no, I'm here. I'm still, I guess, confused on the amendment. Like, I don't understand how the amendment is, clarifying what we want, I guess. So, I'm sorry. This should happen in discussion, but, I'm gonna vote yes on the amendment, I guess.
Okay. Mrs. Kennedy?
Yes on the amendment.
Mr. Udine?
Yes.
Ms. Wilson?
Because I'm contrary and fighting with Mr. Udine, I have to say no.
Ms. Wren?
Before I vote, since I didn't say anything before, I just want to say that I don't doubt the ability of Arsenal to accept these UPrep students into their community. I don't doubt that at all. But I do agree with Ms. Kalida and Mr. Dean that we should be open-ended and not have a decision made ahead of time as to what's going to happen a year from now without involving the community. Because I too was at that meeting, and to sum it up, they said, the stuff's done to us and not with us. So with that, I vote yes for Mr. Dean's amendment.
So what is your vote?
Yes.
Okay. So the amendment is passed. I'm sorry, Ms. Falls?
I vote no.
Okay. The amendment passes 7-2. So the item is amended to reflect Mr. Dean's motion. The amendment's been approved. Well, I mean, this phone is what it is. The amendment's been approved, so the item on the agenda now will include Mr. Dean's amendment. There are some other issues on this tab on this agenda that we have to address before we vote on the report. So, but I'll wait till this is resolved. So I'll wait and see if there's any more comment on this one.
Yes, I have. I do have
Dr.
a
Holly?
comment about this because as a representative for Arsenal, I really and strongly suggest that the district utilize some of the work that's being done at that school to support the school at Malines. You don't have to reinvent, this doesn't have to be something that you have to go out and reinvent all over again. There are models out there in the school district that work very well to support young people. And young people who have many challenges. We have at Arsenal, of course, you know, we have children come there that have also had traumatic lives before they even entered school. Some have never had the opportunity to go to school. So, you know, some of our children are actually in refugee camps. You know, so they have been able to work through that process very well. Now, those challenges do not exist like that at UPrep, but they have their own challenges, and learning how to work through challenges for young people is extremely important. And I strongly am asking the board to look at some of the work that's done there and try and utilize some of that in this environment which you are trying to make for success. I'm voting for that, to have you work for success and not to move students. But come spring, Mr. Udine, they might be coming back here to ask you again. This is not working. We can do a much better job. I hope that the board will be open to the suggestions that come before you to make some of these decisions. My only regret, and I'm going to use Mrs. Wilson's words, that it was regrettable that the district waited until May to actually bring this before the board, and then also bring it before the public. And it has become a storm that has split, well, it's really split the African-American community. And I hope that this is a way of this vote to actually heal it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Holly.
I want to point out that there are 3 items on this agenda addressing charter schools. Item 8.17 is a renewal for the Hill House charter renewal. Item 8.18 is a item for renewal of Propel Charter Hazelwood. And item 8.19, these are separate, is a request to approve an amendment to Hill House Passport Academy to change the name to Academy Charter School, and also approve a relocation as that school can no longer exist at its present site. With respect to 8.17 and 8.18, the motion would be to approve the renewal and directing the law department to develop a series of goals for student achievement. This would be for each of these items. The law department would be directed to return to the board with an agreed set of revised goals for both the Hill House Charter and the Propel Charter School based upon the presentation made by Ms. Augustin at the recent meeting. So these two charter items are before you. The posture of them is to approve it with the language that I described.
Mr. Dean?
Are we voting on them separately
Yes.
or together?
Separately.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no Mr. Dean?
Assuming that item 1.7 is on the floor now? The Hill House?
Yes.
Yes. I listened very closely to the presentations from the Hill House representatives. The Hill House Passport School is a very special jewel, and I'm glad we have it. It is taking in people who may be at their very last option. This could be their very last shot at success for their lives. But I'm also aware that to have a successful school for people who have dropped out or have been pushed out of public schools requires a special approach and talent and technique, and it is not clear to me that the school has described what that special talent and technique is. So at some appropriate point, I would like to hear a presentation of how their approach to dropouts, educating dropouts and getting them back into the system, how that works, what the specific goals are, what their needs are, and how we might be able to support them to be more successful in the future. They're doing great work, and we should be trying to help them meet their goal.
Thank you, Mr. Dean. If there are no other questions or comments, Mr. Weiss, roll call, please. Or do I need a first and second?
Pardon?
Do I need a first and second? Or roll call?
There has to be a motion. I don't know, was there a
Okay.
motion on this?
I got lost for the Education Committee, yes. Okay, motion by Ms. Wilson, second by Dr. Holly. No, this is, should take a roll call vote.
To approve the,
Okay, Ms. Kennedy?
Sorry. All right, first I'm going to start with 6.31. And I'm really concerned. How many references from districts other than Shelby did we receive to use this firm?
There are several schools, but Shelby County was the strongest one that really had got the over 1,000 people back, students back over a 2-year period, and that was very strong. You could imagine that if this contract, the amount that it is for, if we got back 4 students from through this process, it would pay for that within itself.
No, I didn't ask how many Shelby got back. I asked how many other districts gave us a reference.
There were other districts, we talked to other districts, but Shelby County was the one that we are making this decision on based off of the results that they got, based off of the information that they told us. Shelby County is the one that we're going with.
Okay, but did we even talk to any local firms to see if they could do this effort?
I don't know of any local firms who have the ability to actually say and have claimed from another school district that they were able to get back over 1,000 students back into their school district. There's not a local firm that has that track record.
Well, but did we even, my problem is we don't know that they can't do it. We have a lot of grassroots organizations in the area. And to read from here, it says this company's multi-pronged grassroots approach includes leveraging and training local community supporters to engage families through door-to-door visits, over the phone, and at school and community-based events. We have quite a few organizations in Pittsburgh that are very successful at that.
And
So,
part of-
have we talked to any of those organizations to see if they were willing to be paid to do that work for us?
And part of this contract, local organizations will be a part of it. That's part of what they do, not only working with grassroots organizations, so a part of the funding will actually go towards those local groups, and also parents who may not be organized, but may be organized in an organization, also using parents as well. So a part of the strategy is employing, training, and having that local group a part of the process. But mainly, they have the expertise in regards to recruitment. That's mainly what their expertise is, and it has been proven in more than one school district, and Shelby had the strongest case in what they talked to us about of how they worked very well in that district and have a proven track record.
Sure. Did we ever ask them, did they have any stories that were not successful outcomes, any contracts? Did this firm have any contracts with school districts where it was not a successful outcome?
I did not ask to give us recommendations for their failures. I did not ask for that. I asked for recommendations. And I actually had a very in-depth conversation and also the proof and the evidence of their work.
Did you even talk to any other firms, period, at all? I mean, if you were getting a quote to have plumbing done in your house, you wouldn't just take your neighbor's suggestion and use that plumber because the neighbor said they had success and a couple other people. You would want to get multiple quotes and research all of them. So why wouldn't we get multiple quotes from multiple firms and research them?
Ms. Kennedy, what I also will say is that the Association for Administrators also recommended the group. So that association brings together resources for school districts across the country. And so that is another form of recommendation, a validation of this group, that you have a whole organization and an association also giving them the nod.
I think we're going to have to agree to disagree, but I'm going to move on to my next one, which is 7.19. I asked questions in advance that were not answered. When I set my questions prior to agenda review, which unfortunately I had to leave and could not stay for that. So 7.19, I'm curious, all right? The MOU was signed and dated by the vendor on January 29th, 2019. The vendor's invoice is dated February 26th, 2019, with payment due upon receipt. The training occurred March 8th, 2019. So why was this request not submitted for approval in advance of the training or as soon as the invoice was received? We're talking, this is more than 3 months after the training occurred. And we're just seeing this now? It's not acceptable.
So I'm sorry that you didn't receive that. Manika Jenkins, I'm sorry, Chief Academic Officer. I apologize that you didn't receive that. I thought that was sent to you. However, it was a retroactive board tab because the training did take place.
Can you speak up?
Yeah, I can't hear I don't know who's speaking.
Manika Jenkins, Chief Academic Officer. I apologize that you did not receive that. I was under the impression that it was submitted to you. However, that is a retroactive board tab. The training did take place with teachers prior to. So you are correct, but it is a retroactive board tab.
Yeah, but when you guys submit board tabs that are retroactive, there needs to be an explanation written in there for us as board members to know why we have to approve this after the fact. What happens if there's something we don't want to approve, and now we're stuck to pay for it? What happens? That's not a good situation, and this happens on a regular basis. And this is not the first time, and I will not hold my breath that it's the last time either. So I'm tired of seeing these. And yes, it's not a large bit of money on the grand scheme of things, but it's the pattern. And Anytime that something got, I mean, the fact that there was an invoice, that should have generated a board tax. The fact that there was an MOU, that should have generated a board tax. And the fact that the training occurred more than 3 months ago. And this, you know, it just makes no sense to me. This is no way to run a railroad, so to speak. It's bad business sense, and it's bad for the district to do things like this. Because what would happen if we chose not to pay a vendor? Just think about that. And I'll just leave you with that thought. Okay, so thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ms. Wren. I'm finished with my questions and comments on this section.
Are there any more questions or comments? Mr. Dean?
I thought we were taking up the Hill House charter school renewal only.
No, that's part
Well-
of the education. We're taking it all as a whole at this point.
That's why I asked if it was being taken separately or one at a time.
The items are separate, so each approval is separate, but you have the whole report in front of you, and the board asks questions on the items they want to ask questions on.
Well, okay. I have a concern about the Propel. Is that appropriate to discuss this time? Okay. I've never voted for a charter school before because of the antagonistic funding relationship that the state of Pennsylvania has created for charter schools vis-a-vis public schools, and them draining the resources of public schools in order to fund charter schools. And we have no real authority to supervise and to make changes in charter schools when those changes are called for. So now Propel comes along with a long list of other charter schools asking for a renewal. I just want to make the record clear that voting for this particular charter renewal does not in any way suggest how you might anticipate how I will vote on future charter applications. As long as they continue to take resources from the schools and families in my district in order to support charter schools that I can't really oversee, I will continue to be a no vote. But this particular situation in Hazelwood is unique. Schools in Hazelwood have been closed, and now the community ends up with no schools other than this charter school. A school represents a whole lot more to a community than just a place of education. It is an important institution and an important component of the social fabric of that community. And to expect the Hazelwood community to recover economically with absolutely no public school is not fair. And so I will be voting in favor of the Propel charter school renewal for Hazelwood because of its unique situation. But I do not expect that as a general rule, I will be a charter school champion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Just
Dean.
for the record that we are not allowed to vote against charter schools for financial purposes.
Yes.
Thank you,
Thank you
Mr.
for
Carter.
clarifying the
Okay,
record.
we only can listen to one person on the phone at once. Ms. Kennedy and then Ms. Edwards, please.
Okay, I'd like to thank Mr. Dean because actually I forgot about the little speech I was going to say about Hazelwood. once upon a time, there was this thriving community that had 3 schools, 2 public and 1 parochial school. And it had a good business district. It had a lot of jobs. And it had a good variation of people of diverse backgrounds, racial, ethnic, all sorts of things. All right? Little by little, things fell apart. But now, in 6 years' time, starting at the end of the 2000-2001 school year, they lost all 3 of the schools. At the end of 2000-2001 was the round of closures that got Gladstone. 5 years later, at the end of 05-06, was when the right-sizing plan in Berlin was closed. 1 year later was when the Archdiocese closed St. Stephen's. That left them in 6 years' time from 3 schools to 0. And that didn't go over well. So the community has really worked hard. They were looking at options, and even before I was on the board. And in fact, when I was running for the board, I was in a disagreement with them because I wanted to reopen Bergwin as a Pittsburgh public school. And I had to really bite the bullet on that one and agree with them when I realized the administration at the time was never going to do that. So I became behind selling Bergwin Building to the Hazelwood Initiative, knowing they were going to lease it to Propel because we had a buyer offering full price. And the community has really embraced Propel. Propel has embraced the community. This year they made it a community school. And I keep getting invited to all these activities, and they must think I hate them because I never go. But guess what? A lot of them are board nights, all right? But I get calls from people all the time. I hear lots of stuff when I go to Hazelwood Initiative meetings. I see good stuff in the local community paper. I get phone calls and emails from people. The fact of the matter is the number of calls and emails I've had over the last few days, I've lost count. They want this. And they understand it's not the perfect school. But it had a new principal this past school year. And just like when Dr. Hamler came in, we said the first year we weren't expecting results. Well, you can't expect results in 1 year with a new principal. So let's work with them and work with the law office to come up with agreeable standards for what they're going to measure as opposed to that blank check. They're going to have the appropriate measures, and let's let them renew this charter. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Ms. Edwards?
I think there's very little for me to say after Mr. Dean and Ms. Kennedy. So what I am going to say that is part of it is just personal. I'm from the Hazelwood community. I know the people, Reverend Murray, Reverend Smith. I know the school. I know children in the school, family in the school. And I know that they're going to work along with that school to make it a gem. I am thankful that we're going to vote in affirmation for Hazelwood Propel. And I am thankful that my colleagues can do it also. And I congratulate us for doing what is right. The school is a cornerstone in the community. That's not going to change. The community is thriving. And I'm going to look forward to Hazelwood Propel thriving along with the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. Ms. Falls?
Thank you, Ms. Wren. 5101 and a half Lytle Street. That was my home. As a little girl, I grew up there. I went to St. Stephen's and etc. Why am I sharing this? Because I drive through on 2nd Avenue every day when I come to this board, and it breaks my heart to see that community as it is. However, I am aware through many resources that that community is really trying to build itself back up. And there's a lot of organizations that are supporting it. And I honestly believe that this community deserves the opportunity to continue on. I know this is old, and as Ms. Wilson, I believe, has pointed out, some things we're talking about are over. Bergwin should have never been closed. Should never have been closed. However, it is, and we have to move forward. I used to swim at Bergwin, so I'm telling you, in addition to everything else, Hazelwood deserves this second chance, all of us helping this community to grow again. Thank you, Ms. Wren.
Thank you, Ms. Falls. Can I get a first and a second for a roll call vote? Did I do that? Oh, good, thank you. By Ms. Falls. Okay, Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Carter?
So are we voting on the whole report? Or
Yes,
are we voting on
the whole report.
Education report.
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
Ms. Falls?
Yes.
Dr. Hawley?
Yes.
Mrs. Kalida?
Yes.
Mrs. Kennedy?
Yes on the report as a whole, no on 6.31.
Mr. Udine?
Yes.
Ms. Wilson?
Yes.
Ms. Wren?
Just for clarification, Mr. Udine's amendment replaced 8.24? Or am I voting on that as well? 8.24
It
is
says
the...
amended.
So it's Mr. Udine's words?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so no on 6.31 and yes on the report as a whole.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss.
Actually, excuse me.
Yes, Mr. Carter?
I'm voting yes on the report as a whole and no on also on item 6.31. I apologize.
Okay, thank you. Minutes will reflect that.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. We will now move on to the committee report on business, finance, and minority business enterprises that is before you, submitted by Mr. Salahuddin, chairperson, and his committee. The report includes agenda items 10.01 through 12.05. There are no items pulled for further discussion at agenda review. Are there any questions or comments on the committee report on business and finance and minority business enterprises at this time that were not answered at agenda review?
This is Carrie. I have one question.
Ms. Kennedy?
Okay, so on 10.08, I sent a question in advance, and I received an answer because I was curious if psychological testing was only occurring via software these days. And I was told that, and I also said that this response means psychologists have no other method to evaluate students. And the response I received was the Pearson assessment that this vendor provides is only available through this vendor. There are other assessments that the psychologists use that are provided by other vendors. So I want to know what other vendors does PPS use to obtain evaluation software?
I'm sorry, Ms. Kennedy. Not everyone caught that. I'm going to move the mic closer so you can ask that again.
Okay. Okay, so I want to know what other vendors supply our school district with evaluation software?
Ted Dwyer, Chief of Data Research, Evaluation, and Assessment. Just to clarify, you're asking what other vendors supply assessment software to the district?
No, this is for psychological testing. This is a PSC item, and I want to know, and this is to authorize the purchase of this Pearson assessment, all right? And I asked, is psychological testing only occurring via software? And I said that the administrative content section shows a response stating that the evaluation software is only available from this vendor. Does this response mean psychologists have no other method to evaluate students? The response I received in advance was the Pearson assessment that this vendor provides is only available through this vendor. There are other assessments that the psychologists use that are provided by other vendors. So I want to know what other vendors supply our district with the psychological evaluation software. Why don't we just open the windows?
Manika
Come on,
Jenkins,
Casey.
we can get that to you because there are others, but we'll get that to you.
Okay, that I would appreciate. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Wren.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. Forget where I forgot. Oh, if there are no further comments or concerns, do we have a motion for a first motion, a second for a roll call on the committee report on business, finance, and minority business enterprise? Ms. Falls, motion. Thank you. Second. Dr. Hawley for second. Thank you. Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call vote for the report on business, finance, and minority
Carter.
business enterprise?
Mr. Carter? Okay. Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
Ms. Falls?
Yes.
Dr. Hawley?
Yes.
Mrs. Kalida?
Yes.
Mrs. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Udine? Yes. Ms. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Wren?
Yes.
Report's approved, 8-0.
Of interest, we're about to go through a tunnel, so I may have to dial back in, just so don't be concerned if I drop off. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kennedy. We will now move on to the Human Resources Report, item 13.01, that includes addendum A, B, and C, submitted by Sylvia Wilson, chairperson, and her committee. Are there any questions or comments on this report? Ms. Falls.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment about the departure of Linda Wolfgang from CTE. I worked with her as a teacher and competed against her with my kids from the HOSA, the Health Occupation Students of America competition, but both statewide and nationally. And when she came here and became my supervisor, I thought to myself, this is a pretty funny situation, but she has really, really been an asset to this district. And I really, truly want to acknowledge that. And I thank her for all the work that she has done to help the Pittsburgh Public Schools. And we're going to miss her. Thank you, Ms. Wren.
Thank you, Ms. Falls. If there are no further questions or comments, may we have a motion, a second, for a roll call vote on the Human Resources report that includes addendum A, B, and C? Thank you, Ms. Wilson.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Falls. Mr. Weiss, may we please have a roll call vote on the Human Resources report, including addendums A, B, and C?
Mr. Carter? Not voting. Ms. Edwards?
No, I'm
Yes.
still here. Give me 1 second. Yes, on the report.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
Ms. Falls?
Yes, but I do want to note that the question I asked prior to this was the to-be-determined personnel that are not listed will be given to us at a later date, that those positions haven't been filled. Yes.
Thank you. Dr. Hawley?
Yes.
Mrs. Kalida?
Yes.
Mrs. Kennedy? Mr. Udine? Yes. Ms. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Wren?
Yes.
Report's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. We will now move on to budget matters, which include items 15.01 through 15.04. These items will require 4 separate roll call votes. We will begin with item 15.01, budget transfer. Are there any questions or comments on 15.01? If there are no further questions or comments, may we have a motion and a second for a roll call vote? So moved. Second. Thank you, Ms. Falls. Thank you, Dr. Hawley.
Mr. Carter?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
Ms. Falls?
Yes.
Dr. Holly?
Yes.
Mrs. Kalida?
Yes.
Mrs. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Udine?
Yes.
Ms. Wilson?
Yes.
Ms. Wren?
Yes.
Report's approved unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. The next item, 15.02, is to adopt Act 1 Tax Resolution. Are there any questions or comments on item 15.02? If there are no questions or comments, may we have a motion, a second for a roll call vote?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Thank you, Ms. Wilson.
Mr. Carter?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
Ms. Falls?
Yes.
Dr. Holly?
Yes.
Mrs. Kalida?
Yes.
Mrs. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Udine?
Yes.
Ms. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Wren?
Yes.
Item's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. The next item under Budget Matters is 15.03, authorizing implementation of the Act 1 Homestead and Farmstead exclusion. Are there any questions or comments on item 15.03? If there are no questions or comments, may we have a motion and a second for a roll call vote?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Thank you, Dr. Holly.
Mr. Carter?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
Ms. Falls?
Yes.
Dr. Holly?
Yes.
Mrs. Kalida?
Yes.
Mrs. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Udine?
Yes.
Ms. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Wren?
Yes.
Item's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. The last item on the Budget Matters is 15.04, the 2019-2020 Special Education Budget. Are there any questions or concerns on item 15.04? Okay, if there are no questions or comments, may we have a motion, a second for a roll call vote?
So moved.
Okay, Mr. Carter for the motion, Mr. Udine for the second. Thank you. Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll?
Carter?
Yes.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
Ms. Falls?
Yes.
Dr. Holly?
Yes.
Mrs. Kalida?
Yes.
Mrs. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Udine?
Yes.
Ms. Wilson?
Yes.
Mrs. Wren?
Yes.
Item's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. We will now move on to items 16.01, 16.02, and 16.03, the Financial and Controllers Report for month ending May 2019 and the EBE report for the month of June. Are there any questions or comments on these reports? There are no questions or comments. Can I get a first and second for a roll call? Oh, no roll call. Okay. Okay, forget that. Okay, moving on. We're now moving on to new business items.
There are two new business items I will read. They are being considered separately. I will read each one. The first is a resolution of the Board of Public Education of the School District of Pittsburgh renewing the contract of David May Stein, Chief of School Performance, to October 19th, 2022. The term would be October 19th, 2019 to October 19th, 2022. I need a motion and a second and a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Udine, seconded by Dr. Holly. Thank you. Mr. Weiss, may we please have a roll call?
Mr. Carter?
I'm going to abstain on the vote. Thank you.
Ms. Edwards?
Yes.
Ms. Falls?
Yes.
Dr. Holly?
Yes.
Mrs. Kalida?
Yes.
Mrs. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Udine? Ms. Wilson?
Yes.
Ms. Wren?
Yes.
The item carries. The second one is a resolution of the Board of Public Education of the School District of Pittsburgh declaring its intention to consider other candidates for the position of Deputy Superintendent pursuant to 24 Pardon Statutes 10-1077. Be a motion and a second and a roll call.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Falls. Second?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Holly. Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Carter?
I'm abstaining. Thank you.
Ms. Edwards?
I'm not sure for the vote. We're voting to.
You're
I'm
voting
sorry.
to declare your intention to consider other candidates for the position of Deputy Superintendent. That's required under the code, which the practical effect is that the term of the Deputy Superintendent will end October 9th, 2019.
Yes. Yes.
Ms. Falls?
Yes.
Dr. Holly?
Yes.
Mrs. Kalida?
Yes.
Mrs. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Udine?
Please. We are voting to affirm this contract?
No, no.
What is the vote?
The school code requires a school board to take action within 90 days of the end of the term of a commissioned officer, which is a superintendent or assistant, or in this case, a deputy, to either renew his or her term or, in the words of the school code, declare his intention to consider other candidates. By doing that, you are, in effect, saying that the contract will not be renewed and you will consider other candidates for the position.
That's what a yes vote means?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ms. Wilson?
No.
Ms. Wren?
Yes.
Motion carries. That completes the new business.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Are there any announcements to be brought before this evening that do not require legislative vote? Mr. Udine.
I want to announce an important educational conference taking place sponsored by the University of Pittsburgh School of Education on July 18th through the 20th. It's a conference on the school to prison pipeline, and the keynote speaker will be Michelle Alexander. And I would encourage all people interested in education, especially education of people of color and poor people, to attend this conference and hear directly from Michelle Alexander. It's taking place in Alumni Hall, and it's taking place at the Wyndham Hotel. Also at this same conference, I will be putting together a forum on how we teach kids to read. So for all the education stakeholders out there, please look up the conference on the Center for Urban Education at the University of Pittsburgh, July 18th through the 20th. Michelle Alexander is the keynote speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Udine. Ms. Falls?
I would like to take a few minutes to share with you a story about a gentleman who worked for the Pittsburgh Public Schools for 35 years. Stan Haddock taught math and science for 35 years at Pittsburgh Public Schools at day, night, and summer school. He raised 2 sons and was involved in all of their activities. And he had 2 grandchildren. Eventually, he met and he fell in love with Janine. They were together for 22 plus years, married 14. Stan taught at Westinghouse, Brashear, and retired from Pittsburgh Carey in 2008. Stan was ill for quite some time. He experienced heart surgery. He was the first. Goodness. He was the first person to have a 4-way kidney transplant at Allegheny General. He had repeated amputations. 3 weeks in ICU and continued hospital and rehab. Stan never felt sorry for himself. He never asked, why me? He loved cats. His favorite cat's name was Buddy. Unfortunately, Buddy got sick and he died the day before he was supposed to have a kidney transplant. After Stan retired, he got involved into finding and selling antiques. He was a very skilled dealer and he was very successful. Stan was an excellent teacher. When they were out of the house and out and about, students would frequently come up to him and say, "Boy, I hated you in school. But turns out you were right." He loved it. Stan had a huge heart. He loved his friends. Stan's best quality was his sense of humor. If you knew him, you knew that. He found humor in almost everything. Janine and Stan laughed together all the way to the end. Last summer, Janine and Stan threw a party and rented a hall, and the theme was, Stan's not in the hospital. Family, friends, and retired Pittsburgh Carey High School teachers celebrated with Stan. I was there. Jokes, stories, and laughter are the memories I will hold sacred in my heart. On a personal note for me, Stan was a lifesaver in my teaching years. When Central Office started cutting my 15-plus years of internships and dual enrollment to CCAC, Stan would come into my room after school and always find a way to bring a smile to my face and make me laugh. Stan gave me an original Mickey Mouse hat because he knew how many trips I had taken kids to Disneyland and Disney World. Not often in this world do we have a chance to know and love someone like Stan. Janine has said that Stan was the best thing that ever happened to her. She had learned a lot from him. Janine, Stan was somewhat that kind of person who could change your life. He changed my life, and I will forever be grateful to him as a super colleague and a forever friend. Thank you, Stan, for making humor, laughter, and love the way of life. I will try to honor you. Again, thank you to all of our military, past, present, and future. Please keep all of our military sacred in your hearts and in your prayers. Thank you, Ms. Wren.
Thank you, Ms. Falls, for your thoughtful words, and may his memory be a blessing. Are there any other announcements? If there are no other announcements, may I have a motion and a second to adjourn? Thank you, Ms. Wilson, and thank you for the second, Dr. Hawley. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, same. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.